Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. So we're going to talk a little bit today about, failing the California bar and what do we do next. And I see some familiar names. I know some of you are familiar with BarMax, but for those of you who aren't, welcome. We're glad you're here. I'm going to give you some tips that you can apply, whether you decide to go with BarMax or not. But obviously, I work for BarMax. I'm excited to talk about BarMax. So you're going to hear a little bit about our program as well. So with that, I guess, let me go ahead and jump into our topic for today. So I guess, let me just talk a little bit about the BarMax to start with, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about failing the bar exam and kind of why that happens and what your next steps might be. So there we go. So title of today's presentation is I failed the bar, now what? What do I do next? So one of the things I really love about BarMax is the bar tutors. And so that's actually something I do as well. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am licensed in both California and Nevada. And I've been doing bar prep work for about 15 years. And probably my most favorite thing in the whole world is to, well, maybe not the whole world, right? I love you all, but you're not going to compete with a nice tub of, coffee, buzz, Ben and Jerry's and a delicious rom-com, right? But maybe second most favorite thing is going to be doing bar tutoring. I love working with folks and helping them develop schedules. I love helping them work on their writing. I also like working with folks who need to improve their MBE scores. So we'll talk a little bit more about all that and what it looks like if you end up having a BarMax tutor, but this is something to know about. Whoops, and now I'm making us go backwards. I will get us there, I promise. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second while I try to figure out what is happening. There we go. Okay, I think I've solved this. So let me come back and share again. Share. Okay. And then I click play. So this is just some testimonials. These are actually not even the most recent ones. They're just a selection of testimonials that we picked to go ahead and share with you. I think that the sort of common takeaway that you're going to see from BarMax and reviews of BarMax is super flexible in terms of scheduling and when you do what you're going to do, and very flexible in terms of location, right? You don't have to necessarily be sitting in front of your computer. This is something that you can do on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever you're going to do. We also super love working with repeat takers, and we have a fair number of folks who do work with us who are repeat takers. So just be aware of that. If you are interested in contact information, here's everything you need to know. You can, poke around a little bit on the website and see a bit more about what is available there. You can also email us, call us, whatever you would like to do. We're around and we're available. These are just a couple of things that I think make BarMax unique, right? So I've been doing this for about 15 years. As I mentioned, I've worked with a number of different law schools. And so I've had students who, I was not affiliated with any bar prep company. And I've had students who come back to me and report frustrations or challenges. And I think that BarMax really does a lot to try to address what a lot of folks find challenging about preparing for the bar. So one thing I super love is we have a clear commitment to using only real questions, meaning questions that are released by the National Conference of Bar Examiners for our MBE questions and released essay questions from the California bar exam as well, right? We have clear lectures, and we really have a commitment to keeping, you're not going to get some huge volume of law where it's like, learn everything. It's, hey, what can we do to help you learn the things you absolutely need to know to pass the bar? Okay, so having talked a little bit about us and why I love BarMax, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit more about failing the bar exam. So the first thing that happens is you're going to have some feelings, right? And that's okay. And you're supposed to have feelings. And some of you may have had this, you may have had your like sitting on the couch, eating your ice cream and crying, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. Some of you may still be there. That is okay. And those feelings can range from being angry and feeling like it's super unfair and to resentful. Why have all of my friends seem to have passed the bar and I haven't? Those folks are, and sort of the corollary to that, right, is I see people who are, didn't study hardly at all, and they seem to have passed and I didn't. To just feeling really demoralized and demotivated. Like, why am I even trying here? Maybe I should just do something else. Like, is there any point to me continuing to try to do this? Anxious. When is my day going to come? Overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, there's this huge amount of material and I did all this hard work and it didn't seem to be effective. What do I do next? All of those feelings are super normal and you get to have them, and ignore anybody who says, you're so smart. Of course you'll pass the bar. Why are you upset about this? Or says, basically tries to tell you that you don't get to have your feelings, because you do. And they're actually a really necessary part to becoming successful the next time around, right? Is to allow yourself to have grief, honestly, right? You're going through a challenging experience and it is normal to have those emotions. So I want you to go ahead and be comfortable with that, and let those feelings happen as they come in. But you don't get to stop there, right? One of the most common sort of questions that I get is, why did I fail? Why did I fail? What happened to me? The first thing that tends to happen is you have someone who didn't study, right? And sometimes we think like, oh, were they just goofing off? Like, what was happening? But 9 times out of 10, that's not it. When I talk about someone who doesn't study, we're talking about someone who, holy guacamole, I was trying to study in the middle of a global pandemic while working from home and raising 3 kids and also family members that I was concerned about. This is not someone who's just like not working. They're just not able to put the time into the study that they're going to need to really be successful. And sometimes for these folks, honestly, like just taking it again, like just getting a second attempt to look at the material can be helpful. And sometimes it's really sitting down and working out a schedule, and think a realistic schedule, like, this is what else is going on in your life right now. How do we get you to a place where you're doing what you need to do to pass? Then you have the folks who are studying, right? They are putting in that time, man, but they are studying the wrong things. And most of the time what I see with these folks are going to be folks who have these are the folks who say, I have to understand community property before I can do a community property question. I totally get that instinct, and don't do that. What we know about human learning is that you actually learn more when you test yourself. So it's actually far more effective to test yourself than it is to focus on sort of reading and rereading the material. So you really want to, if you are one of those people where you're working and you're raising 3 kids and you're like, Jen, I love the idea of a flexible schedule. That sounds terrific. And then you're thinking to yourself, I'm just going to study. If you have to pick one thing, if you came to me and you said, Jen, like, this is everything else that is going on in my life, what should I do? I would say practice. That is the number one most important thing. The other reason that I see folks fail sometimes is going to be anxiety. Exam day anxiety for sure, but also sort of prep period anxiety. And this can be pretty prevalent for our repeat takers, right? I had a repeat taker once who told me she had set up this really lovely study space in her back bedroom, super excited to use it, until it came time to actually sit down at the desk and start doing the work. And she just found, she's like, I can't go into that room. Why can I not go into that room? And it's like, well, come on, because, again, your feelings, right? Like, how does it doesn't feel good. So how do we get you past that? And I am going to talk about that as well today. So if you're hearing that, you're like, gosh, that's resonating for me, Jen. I am going to talk about some strategies for that. Now, there's a fourth reason that people sometimes fail, and that is going to be undiagnosed learning disabilities. So nowadays, many folks are actually diagnosed with their learning disabilities at earlier stages than might have been true when I was in school, or other folks might have been in school. But it's still not uncommon to have folks who are diagnosed with a learning disability in law school. You actually sort of have developed kind of intuitive ways of sort of working around your disability throughout your, K-12 undergrad career, and now you're in law school and you realize, shoot, maybe I have a learning disability. Similar, because you're just sort of pushed to the limit where whatever strategy it was you were sort of intuitively using before just isn't sufficient because law school is more challenging than what you were doing before. Same thing with the bar exam, right? So certainly I have had repeat takers who were diagnosed with a learning disability as they were preparing for the bar. So, I'm not going to be able to talk too much about that experience right now, but I do want you to be aware that it's there. And if that's kind of, your spidey senses are tingling with that, don't hesitate to learn more about getting diagnosed and getting even just some adaptive study techniques that would allow you to be successful. Okay. So I love this quote. I'm a big Mark Twain fan. My kids know how much I love Mark Twain. This is one of my favorite quotes of Mark Twain. So eat a live frog in the morning and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day, right? Basically the idea being that, you get to have these feelings, you get to say, why me? Why did this happen to me? But you don't get to stop there. You have to do the hard thing. What does that mean? It means looking at your scores, it means looking at your writing, and it means making the adjustments you need to make to be successful. And hey, by the way, guys, don't mistake me. Don't think that I'm saying that the bar exam is a really good indicator of who will or will not be successful as an attorney. Actually, there's been a ton of writing by many different scholars that says, hey, the bar exam probably not the best way to figure out whether or not someone is going to be a good attorney. Because if you think about all of the skills that you need to be an attorney, not necessarily the stuff that's tested on the bar. So if some of your feelings are, does this mean I'm not going to be a good attorney? The answer is probably not, probably doesn't mean that. The far more likely, here's the thing, right? Like your client is never going to walk into your office and say, answer this super long, complicated question I have, don't look anything up and only take an hour. It's not really how it works. So we know that. And so if any of you are having that feeling of, does this mean that I might not be excellent at being an attorney? That's not what it means. And plenty of incredibly intelligent, capable people have failed the bar the first time around, or the second time around, or the more than that times around, right? And that is one of the things about being in a particularly challenging state like California. Most folks know how difficult this exam is, and so don't allow yourself to internalize any of those feelings of are people looking at me and like wondering what's wrong? Are people thinking that I'm not going to be a good attorney? No, we all know the truth about this exam and how it really functions. So just go ahead and put that outside of your mind. The other thing that we know statistically is that most repeat takers will pass the bar exam at some point, right? So if the bar exam were a really good measure of anything, right, we would assume that, once you failed the bar exam, well, then you're just not going to pass the next time, right? That doesn't seem to be the case. Most repeat takers will eventually pass the bar exam. So, once you've sort of had your moment of why me and this sucks and I just feel crappy, and you've taken that moment, then it's time to really get into the meat of it and say, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm in that percentage of folks who is successful as a repeat taker? And so the first thing that I would want you to do would be to look at your score. And one of the most common questions that we get is going to be, what does my score mean? So Passing score for California is a 1390. If you're coming from another state or you've taken in another state, you'll sometimes see the MBE score expressed as like a 3-digit number with some decimal and then some hundredths and tenths placed after that. Not so much here in California. They're going to actually express that as a 1390 or a 1400 or 1410 or whatever. So when you're looking at that score sheet and you're keeping in mind, hey, I need a 1390 to pass, your MBE and your essay are each worth half of your total score. So in my ideal world, you're hitting at least a 1390 on both sides. Now there's some wiggle room, right? Like if you got a 1410 on your MBE portion, you could get a 1370 on your MBE portion, no, written portion. That's how we're doing it. But, the idea being they're going to average those two together. So while I want you to aim for a 1390 on both sides, recognize there's a little bit of wiggle room because it's going to be added together and averaged, right? So first thing you're probably going to look at is going to be that MBE score because I think it's the easiest, right? Like it's a single number. Okay, what does this mean? So here's what you need to know. National average for the MBE is usually about a 141, or you might express it as a 1410 for July takers. MBE for February takers tends to be a little bit lower nationally, but thereabouts, right? In terms of just sort of raw numbers correct, like what does that look like? Usually about 62% correct. Now that's national data. California, usually going to be a little bit higher. So usually going to be maybe 63, 64-ish% correct. I'm going to be asking you to aim for, give yourself some wiggle room, right? Because some padding, because, if you're too far off that number, giving yourself some padding by aiming for a higher number during your prep period is going to allow you to kind of relax a little bit on game day, right? You'll do even better when you're at home in your comfortable environment than you will on game day. Most people, now there's a certain group that like, oh my gosh, the adrenaline hits them on game day and they're like, but for most of us, we want to actually create some padding. We want to try to be getting about 65, 66, 67% correct during our practice period. In terms of written answers, it's going to vary a little bit from year to year just based on scaling. And the California Bar website actually has the best explanation of scaling I've ever seen. So if you are still like, wait, how does scaling work? They have a beautiful, beautiful explanation. But because it works to try to, the effect of it, the purpose of it is to equalize the exam from year to year so that the exam I took, however many years ago, and the exam you take are the same amount of difficulty. Okay. But what we know, even with scaling and all of that, is generally you want to be between a 60 and a 65 on your written answers. So I would tell you, you want to be aiming for between a 65 and a 70. Okay, that's kind of your goal there. All right, so here are I've just picked some different patterns that I've typically see. And so kind of next steps depending on what those patterns are. So, whoops, see, there we go. Okay. So let's say that you have a 1430 on your MBE. So your MBE is actually, good, right? Slightly better than the national average. Go you. But your essays are all in the 50 to 55 range. This is someone who knows the law. Remember, we talked about how there's folks who they study, they put in the time, but it's not necessarily studying the right things. So this person, I'm happy with however they studied last time around in terms of memorizing the rules. But I'm going to want them to do some practice, particularly on the writing piece. And sometimes it's just needing to do the writing. And for some folks, it's needing to do the writing and get feedback. And for some folks, it's needing to do the writing and get feedback, and then maybe also talk to somebody and say, hey, how does, what does this mean? When my commenter says, expand on this argument, what does that mean, right? And it's just having somebody look at it and say, this is what you need to do. And that can be really useful for folks. So that's one thing you might see. High MBE, low essays or written answers. And in particular here, I've said essays, but you could also think of it as being written answers. If the PT was high, then I would say this is clearly a needing to write essays issue. But because here we don't necessarily see a higher PT, it seems like a writing issue kind of across the board. All right, so next pattern you might see would be somebody who's actually a really good writer, but just can't crack that MBE. And a lot of times this is somebody who has done a ton of practice with the writing or did very well in law school where they did a lot of essay writing and now needs to shift to like, okay, what do I do with the MBE? And sometimes for these folks, what's really frustrating is the essay is about exploring nuance and it's about presenting the argument and the counter argument and using all your facts. And then we get to the MBE and it's like, no, there's a best answer. There's an ostensibly right answer. Wait, what? I mean, that's a huge shift in the way that you kind of think through how you approach legal problems. So one of the things I really like about BarMax is the fact that every released MBE question is available to you. So these are actually questions that National Conference of Bar Examiners has used in previous administrations of the bar. So we know that's going to be the best sort of example of what you're going to see on the actual MBE. And some folk, we also have these frequent office hours where you can stop by and see those. I know Celeste, who's here, is actually doing a set of 3 different office hours. And remember, I said earlier, we try to be really flexible. Those office hours are recorded. You can go back and watch them. And if you're listening to this and you're like, Jen, I don't know if I'm going to do BarMax or not, these webinars, which are different than the office hours, are also available on YouTube, and you can check out the webinars and kind of see some of those things too. And of course, like I mentioned, we do have that tutoring. So you do all the questions, you do a bunch of questions, you do a bunch of research on how to get better at doing MBE questions, and you still want to talk to somebody and say, I need somebody to actually sit down and look at this with me and help me figure out what to do differently. Hey, those people are available to you through BarMax. Okay. This is another one, and sometimes this is one of those things where people are like, what is happening here? And this is the person where it's just all over the map, right? They have, sort of a low MBE score, and then they've got like a 75 on one essay. They got a 50 on another essay. They kicked butt on the PT, got an 80. What does this mean? Well, it tells me that this is someone who knows how to do the writing because they did well on the PT. So if somebody gives them the law, they know how to do the writing, but they just don't necessarily have what they need to have for the law that they need in order to be able to accurately answer a question that isn't in an area that they feel good about. And in some jurisdictions, they'll actually break that MBE score down. They have in previous years for California. I don't know if they're going to for October, just given the weird circumstances, but they'll actually tell you, like, this was your percentile for Civ Pro. This was your percentile for evidence. And the other thing we'll sometimes see with this person is they're like in the 90th percentile for evidence. They are an evidence genius, but they're in the 10th percentile for torts. So it's, again, sort of a patchy knowledge kind of thing. And this is someone who needs to go back and shore up those subjects where they didn't necessarily do as well. This is obviously someone who's doing well on the PT, but if you're hearing this and you're thinking, PT, wait, what? Am I supposed to be practicing those? Yes, you are. And we have both the CPTs and the MPTs, which will allow you to do extensive practice. I'm sure you know, California used to do this like 3-hour PT. It was kind of its own animal. And then a few years ago, they changed it to this 90-minute PT, which is much closer to the what every other state, well, not every other, many other states are using, the multi-state performance test. And so, we do have those 90-minute CPTs, but, probably not enough there to really get the practice that you're going to need. So we're also going to include the multi-state performance tests. Okay. So All right, you sat down with your score, you looked at it, maybe one of these three like scenarios kind of resonates with you, or maybe many of them do. And so now you've ordered a copy of your essays, right? And look, guys, you should absolutely order a copy of your essays, right? So it's like what, like $25 or something like that. It takes a couple of weeks. Why wouldn't you? The only time that I would say you don't need to would be if you are someone who, really struggled with the MPE, but your essays are all at a 70 or higher. Maybe save yourself the slight amount of money it is to get them, but otherwise, I would order them. So you've looked at your scores, and now you're going to look at your writing. And here's what you're looking for. You're going to look at, did I follow IRAC? Do I have an issue heading? Is it underlined or bolded or all caps or a question mark after it? Something that would make it easy for the examiner to find. Do I have a rule? Is the rule complete? Do I sound lawyerly when I give my rule? Do I have both the general rule and then the exception to the rule, or the specific rule that's being tested here, right? So I was talking with someone the other day who's a first-time taker, actually, but they were like, hey, I said that they need to pierce the corporate veil. Yes, absolutely. But before you can tell me about piercing the corporate veil, you've got to explain to me, hey, a corporation is a separate entity. And then you need to tell me what pierce the corporate veil means. Then you can talk about whether that's going to happen here. So you want to go back through that critical eye. Then I want you to look at your analysis. And when you're looking at that analysis, I want you to, I want you to think about, did you talk about all of the facts? Did you use all of them? If you look at the question, and the questions are up now, so you can actually go back and look at those questions now if you want. They'll put up some model answers in a few days. Model answers. They call them representative good answers, meaning these are kind of a couple of different approaches. And I love California because they actually put up two. So you can see two different samples of, here are two different ways that you can get to the same place, which is a good answer. It's not like there's one right way to do it. So you can kind of approach it from that way. So you're looking at the question, did you use all the facts? If there's something that's ambiguous, did you explore that ambiguity? Did you give an argument and a counter argument where it was appropriate? Did you come to a clear conclusion and say, this is what I think is going to be appropriate here? When you're looking at your analysis, do you have trigger words? Just simple stuff like here, comma, or this element is met because these facts, or this fact demonstrates this element is not met, therefore. Those kinds of things. While it's true that element is not met, comma, this other element, blah, 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 you've incorporated a counter argument. Just really quickly looking for those trigger words can be helpful. In a minute, I'm going to talk about how to work with others, let's say it that way, to improve your score, but can also be super valuable for that because, you got a friend that's reading your essays for the first time. It's kind of like those, what do they call them? Oh gosh, what are they called? Those sort of trick pictures, right? That you look at, and some people see the old lady, and other folks see the young lady wearing a feathered hat. Optical illusion. That's what it is. Optical illusion. So it can almost be like an optical illusion where your mind kind of fills in what you were thinking when you wrote that piece of writing, rather than what's actually there. So getting somebody else to look at it and be super forthright with you about, you came close, but here's why you didn't get full credit. And if you don't have friends or family or other folks that you can work with, obviously we'll do that for you, but lots of different ways you can do that, with other folks who are preparing for the bar as well. Okay. So next steps. So you've looked at your scores, you've kind of tried to figure out, is this a knowledge problem? Is this a practice problem? What happened here? You've looked at your writing. For those of you who just got your scores and you have to make that decision, you may have to make that decision like now, right? So you may not have your writing yet. That's okay. It's not ideal, but you'll have a pretty good sense from your score whether you need to work on writing or not. But decide when you're going to take the bar exam. So if you look at it and you're like, I am one of those people where I can get an 80 when I know the law, but my MBE is not terrific, and I have a couple of essays where I really struggled, and I just have a brand new baby, And it's the middle of a global pandemic, and hey, this may not be the time for you to take the bar, right? Like, let's put it off a few months, there we go, and actually give you some extra time to prepare, right? Like, if what you need is more knowledge and your life circumstances are such that it's going to be difficult to do that right now, let's give you some additional time. Then I want you to go ahead, whenever you decide it's going to be, hey, it's going to be in February, or it's going to be in, next July or whenever, go ahead and register. And then I'm going to want you to build your study schedule. And here is a place where those of you who are repeat takers are actually better equipped than our first-time takers. You know what skills you have and what skills you don't. So if you kicked butt on that MBE, you don't need, should you spend some time there? Of course, because I want you to maintain those skills that you gathered. But also, you could spend more time on your writing, because that's where you struggled. On the other hand, right, if you were one of those people where, you wrote the heck out of that exam, but you did not necessarily have the MBE score you were hoping for, maybe you're going to stop and say, okay, I need to really focus on that MBE. And so maybe you are the person who's doing 33 or 50 questions a day, and most of your practice time is spent there. And you're just doing an essay here and there, again, because you want to stay fresh with that. So you're going to know what skills you need to work on. You're also going to know what subjects you do or do not know, right? So if you kicked butt on the PR essay, maybe that's not something you need to do a ton more studying on. Maybe, you didn't do as well on torts. That might be something that you want to look at, right? Now, obviously, I want you to pay attention to what you are and are not necessarily good at based on your scores, on the subjective measure that we have that our first-time takers don't always have. And also, I still want you to think about what you're likely to be tested on. So again, if you came to me and you said, I have to take the bar this February, global pandemic, working, kids, caring for my aging mom, lots of stuff on my plate. What do I do? My number one thing would be practice. I want you to practice, because that's going to get you the practice. And when you review it, it's going to get you the knowledge. But the next thing I would tell you is, if you have limited time, I want you to think about, what are you likely to be tested on? So we know that all of your Wednesday is going to come from those 7 MBE subjects. We also know that most of your Tuesday, so 5 essays, so maybe 4 of them are going to be from those MBE topics, right? So kind of think of it as like a graph, right? And here you've got stuff that you're not good at, and here you've got stuff that you're likely to be tested on. If you're here, like, hey, I'm not very good at it, and I'm very likely to be tested on it, you want to make sure that you're doing that thing, right? That's really important. But, hey, if you didn't necessarily, you weren't the best at something super obscure, not super obscure, but obscure, less likely to be tested on, then, maybe you don't need to spend as much time on that piece. I also will say, as you think about what skills you need to develop, PT, there's no beating that, you guys. So written portion is going to be worth half of your overall grade. PT is worth 2 essays. Basically, that means that your PT is worth slightly more than 14% of that total score. The PT is the single place where you can make the biggest difference in one fell swoop, right? So MBE is worth half. That would be the next biggest place. But remember, the MBE is still spread across 7 questions. So those individual MBE subjects tend to be worth about 7% each. Contrasted with the PT, which is worth like 14.3 or 4 or 5% each, but let's say more than 14% for the PT. So, skills wise, absolutely make sure you have that PT. Then think about your MBE, then think about your essay. Okay. So, if you listen to that and you thought, I just did not study enough. Like, I have to figure out how to get myself to study more. Absolutely something we can help you with. If you listen to that and you thought oh man, I have got to be doing more practice questions. That's where I screwed up. Absolutely something we can help you with. But what about anxiety? What do we do to manage your anxiety? So the first thing that I want you to know is that exam anxiety really has two parts, right? There's that prep period anxiety and there's exam day anxiety, right? Where your prep period anxiety is kind of like, I mean, it's what it sounds like, right? Like you're anxious as you're trying to prepare. And your exam day anxiety is, actual day of, I feel super anxious. I don't know what to do next. What's going to happen? So if you know that anxiety was an issue for you, I want you to make managing that anxiety a priority. And for a lot of us, we kind of think, gosh, I should just be able to muscle through this. Why am I just succumbing to this anxiety? I just need to manage. I just need to push through. It's not realistic. Okay. So I actually want for you folks who know anxiety is a thing, I want managing that anxiety to be as important for you as something like, studying the MBE topics or writing the questions is. It's as fundamental a piece of your bar exam success as the skills or the knowledge are. It needs to be on your schedule. So whatever it is that works for you to manage your anxiety, put that on your schedule. I don't want you to skimp on the, sort of basic, being a human being kind of thing. So things like sleeping and exercise and healthy eating. And if you've heard me talk about how these things actually will help you acquire the knowledge and build the skills, that is absolutely true, but it also will help you manage anxiety. So, I know it sounds like the mom speech, but if you know that you have to manage that anxiety, this is stuff you need to work on. So hopefully I've sold you on the idea that managing your anxiety is important to your success. What does it look like? So tons of different options. One thing that I have found particularly interesting is the idea of journaling. Not a big journaler myself, so I know for those of you who like me, you're like, I don't know. It's actually a very particular type of journaling, and it works best for those of us who find ourselves lying awake at, bedtime. Your eyes are open, you're staring at the ceiling, and you're just thinking about everything you still need to do and feeling super overwhelmed. How can you get past that? Journaling. Or it looks like those of you who are like the woman I worked with years ago who just, she walked past that closed back bedroom door and was like, I can't do this. It's really hard. Journaling can help. And it is a very specific type of journaling. It doesn't necessarily have to be written. It can be typed. You could, call someone who's willing to be patient and listen to you. And I say be patient because for a lot of us, these thoughts are very cyclical. So it's not like you're going to necessarily have new things to say, but it's like sort of your brain is saying, hey, we haven't paid attention to this in a while. Let me remind you that this is super unfair, right? Or let me remind you that you only have however many days are left. And are you really using them well? So this journaling or talking or typing, or even if it's just like a video journal, I don't care. What's it going to look like? So research suggests it needs to be more than 15 minutes for you to really get all of that out, but less than 20 minutes. More than 20 minutes and you kind of get stuck in this complaining cycle, and it can actually make you feel worse. So 15 to 20 minutes, and you can just think of it as a brain dump. You're kind of trying to convince your brain, hey, all that stuff you're worried about, I found a place for it. We're going to keep it here. We'll come back and worry about that later. And the other thing you want to do to trick your brain, if this is something you want to try, is to go ahead and put that on your schedule, right? Contemplative practices like mindfulness, meditation, prayer, even yoga, anything like that can be helpful in terms of managing this prep period anxiety. And for some of us, right, yoga, but running, regular cardio exercise can also be helpful. You might even consider a mix of both, right? But this is just kind of, hey, how do you manage your anxiety as you lead up to it? What does that look like? Okay. But then what about exam day anxiety? So I kind of joke that I have this, like, I have a committee in my head, right, that likes to tell me all of the things that I've done wrong or potentially forgotten about or whatever. And they're definitely present for me during the lead up. And then during things like, it's been a while since I had to take a bar exam, but exam day like things, single instances where my anxiety is high, my committee tends to say, you can't do this. So for me, I did sort of the opposite reaction. I created a mantra that is, I am doing it. I'm doing it right now, right? Kind of reminding myself, you feel like you can't do this, but you can. So, you may want to have a catchphrase that is specific to you. It's like, hey, I'm going to counter the committee in my head by saying this opposite thing. But it also could be a favorite verse from a spiritual text. It could be a motivational phrase. It could be anything you want that would be useful for you. A psychologist would tell you to think about this catastrophic thinking, because for most of us, if we're going to have exam day anxiety, what this looks like is, oh God, I really hope I don't get a secured transactions question. What am I going to do if I do? Or, whatever your subject is that you're just dreading, community property. And then if I do, I'm going to fail the bar. And if I fail the bar, I'm never going to be able to get a job. Well, that's not really true, right? Like we really push on that and we say, wait a minute. If you get the question in the subject you don't like or you don't feel confident about, maybe you won't do well on it, but maybe you'll kind of be able to make it work. And I'm actually, for those of you who are BarMax folks, I am going to do an office hour on how to make up a rule, like what to do if that happens to you. Or maybe you'll get that question and you're not going to do very well, but you could still pass the bar exam by doing well on the rest of the questions. Or God forbid you do fail the bar exam, you can still get a job, right? Your family will still love you. You're not going to be walking around with a big, scarlet letter on your chest. So our brain tends to be like, hey, this one single instance is going to be the end of everything. But that's just like not really true. So if you can kind of push back on that catastrophic thinking and remind yourself that's not reality, that can be helpful. Another technique that some people like is going to be box breathing. So box breathing is breathing in for a count, usually it's 4, holding your breath for a count, again, usually 4, breathing out for a count, again, usually 4, and then holding for a count, usually 4. And you can see why it's called a box, right? Because everything's equal there. Or what is sometimes called falling breath. Falling breath is going to be that you breathe in as much as you possibly can. And then you take one more additional breath of air, and then you breathe out for as long as you can. And you're really focusing on emptying your breath, including kind of squeezing your tummy muscles and pushing that air out. And that is something you can do right there at the computer, right? You can do that breathing. You can also use tensing and relaxing. So I carry a lot of my stress in my shoulders. So sometimes for me, I actually will kind of tense up on purpose. And then when I relax, I actually go back to a more relaxed position than I was in before. If you are someone who struggles with anxiety, you need to also engage in what is called over-preparation. So over-preparation, for most folks, if you're at the 66% right on the MBE. Excuse me, gosh. So there we go. So for most folks, if you're at that 66% right, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But for our folks who have anxiety, you may need to be closer to 70, just because we know that there's going to be a little bit of attrition because of that anxiety, right? And here's the thing, we've talked about, we've all heard this phrase, fight or flight. And of course, now they add fight, flight, or freeze. And basically, here's what's happening. Your sort of, what you might call your lizard, you may have heard called your lizard brain, your amygdala is saying, oh my gosh, I'm super anxious. We're under attack. We need to do something. And then your prefrontal cortex is like, yeah, we're going to sit here and take this exam. And your lizard brain is saying, oh my gosh, no, we need to run, or we need to fight, or we need to freeze. And you're trying to reason your way out of that. Super hard to do. And hey, the first part of your brain that gets shut off when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode is going to be that prefrontal cortex that does things like remember things and make decisions and think creatively. So what you have to do is, the reason we're like, hey, breathing and having a catchphrase that you can repeat and over preparation and all of that is about kind of getting out of that sort of animalistic fight, flight, or freeze and back into the part of your brain that can make decisions. So hopefully that is going to be useful for you as you think about how do you respond to these, the scores and like, what do you do? So now I'm going to turn to the part that says, particularly for those of us who are repeat takers, how do we manage our motivation? And so I was trying to find a graphic for this slide. And I was like, how do I explain that motivation is not constant, right? Like you kind of have the ramp up stage and then you have the dip and then you have the ramp back up stage and whatever. And I was like, oh, you know what? It kind of looks like a cosine graph, right? Of the way the cosine wave works. And then I was like, hey, here's a math joke. Motivation is not a constant, it's a harmonic. And I told my son, who's in Algebra 1 this year, and he was like, yeah, Mom, maybe not as funny a joke as you think it is, but I think it's funny. Now you've heard it. Hopefully you also thought it was funny. But the takeaway is motivation is not constant. And as somebody who's been doing this for a while, I can tell you, for a lot of folks, kind of the beginning period, it's kind of like back to school night, right? And you get your little study area all set up and you get your books and your computer and you've got the app open and you're like, I'm going to nail this thing this time. And your motivation's at a high. And then you kind of get started and you're like, yeah, I've got this. And after a week or two, like you're just tired and it's just hard. And maybe you've had some feedback that isn't exactly what you were hoping and your motivation will dip. And then you have that moment of like, yeah, the exam's coming up and the motivation goes back up and it's going to go again. So the first thing to remember, if you're struggling with getting motivated, if you're struggling with, oh, I don't want to have to start over, is that it isn't natural and you are not expected to be at a high of motivation all the time. So this is about how do you work past that? When you're in one of those dips, how do you still get yourself to sit down and do the thing, whatever the thing is? So the first thing that I want you to think about is evoking self-efficacy. And what does evoking self-efficacy mean? Basically, it just means reminding yourself of why you're going to do this. So I picked 2 images that had some meaning to me. When I was contemplating going to law school, Ally McBeal was on TV, kind of a big thing, for those of you who don't remember, or maybe haven't had the opportunity to watch Ally McBeal. So she was a lawyer. It was kind of a comedy, but they would sometimes have more serious matters or whatever. She used to wear all these cute suits. I was just like, yeah. So that was something that was meaningful to me. And then I also had this whole, like, I'm going to go to Disneyland when this is done, which was also a commercial back in the day, right? Like, what are you going to do next? I'm going to Disneyland. But so for me, if I was having that moment of, oh, I can't believe I'm still studying this, it's the worst. Thinking about kind of why am I doing this is helpful. And that's actually called, it's actually this technique that's taught is called evoking self-efficacy. So for you, if it's like, hey, I want to imagine myself as a lawyer, you want to get as specific with it as you can. Are you going to court? Are you working in an office? Are you in a conference room? What does the furniture look like? What kind of clothes are you wearing? What sound do your shoes make when you walk across the floor? Are you carrying a briefcase? Really, really minute details. If it's like, hey, I'm going to provide for my family, what does that look like? Have you paid off your house? Are you putting your kids in college or private school? And what does it look like? Similarly, if you're like at the end of this, and we're going to talk about rewards in a minute, but if you're going to reward yourself with a nice trip or something fun, imagine that, like, hey, what does it feel like to be at Disneyland? And you're going to get one of those churros and you're going to, go on the Haunted Mansion ride or whatever it is that's meaningful for you. But again, the more specific with it you can get, the better off you're going to be. And that can be as simple as just reminding yourself, like, I got to get through this bar exam to be the person who's, well provided for in retirement. But if you're still like not feeling it, really imagining again, like, what does that look like? Does that look like having your own RV and traveling across the states? But imagining kind of in your mind's eye, this is what it would look like. So rewards. One thing that bar exam retakers tend to do is they kind of get into this mental state of, it's almost like they're punishing themselves. I will study for 12 hours straight. I will never talk to my friends again. I'm not going to stop even for meals. I'll just eat at my desk and I'm going to sit in my super uncomfortable chair. And it's like, no more messing around. Yes, I gotcha. And I'm proud of your desire to do this hard work. And that is not sustainable. This should not be an exercise in self-flagellation. It should not be an exercise in punishing yourself. It's not about, you did something wrong, you're a bad person. It's about, how do we change? Don't study harder, study smarter, right? So rewards can be helpful. So does that look like having a comfy spot to work? Someplace that you can look forward to going to? And then sort of small rewards throughout the day. Hey, if I can do these 33 questions at the end, I'm going to make myself a fancy coffee. Or if I can finish this essay, then I'm going to take a 20-minute break to watch a TV show. Notice I said 20 minutes, right? And personalize this. If you are me and you know that as soon as you put that TV show on, you're going to be there for at least 3 episodes, maybe that's not the reward for you. And it can be anything, but, reward, what could it be? Anything, right? It can be calling your family or talking to your friends, or a food or drink reward, like, the coffee or a chocolate chip cookie or whatever. It could be going for a walk. It could be spending some time playing with the dog, but some small thing to make that journey like a little bit more rewarding. Like, hey, you've done the thing. It was difficult, go. And then think about those larger rewards after longer or more effort. So, hey, if I've done a pretty good job studying for, the weekdays, then on Friday, I'm going to order from Grubhub and we're going to have dinner, outside dinner, but at home. Or maybe it looks like imagining that trip to Disneyland at the end of it. But those rewards are far more likely to be motivating than the punishment, or that kind of like, I really have to buckle down, kind of beating yourself up is. Okay. I also talked about, hey, you could use your friends who may also be preparing for the bar to help you prepare. Maybe they look at your answers and can help you, because your mind is just automatically filling in those blanks. Maybe they can help you identify it. We can do the same thing. I had a pair of repeaters who studied together. One is now a state senator and in another state, and also the other one is currently practicing law. So, like I said, most repeaters are eventually successful. And they told me they were accountability buddies, and I love that idea. And this can be as simple as like your gym buddy, like, hey, I am not going to show up at the gym at 6 a.m. unless I know somebody is waiting for me. And that's just all I need, is somebody to kind of be like, yeah, show up, because otherwise I'm going to be upset that you didn't. But you could also turn it into a competition. And there's some data, and again, I'm having to borrow a little bit from exercise psychology here. But so, your Fitbit competitions that you might do with your friends, people who do those competitions tend to take, I think it's something like 20% more steps than those who don't. So just competing, like, hey, how many questions did you do today? Or, and focus on the how many rather than how well, right? Because how well is harder to control. So think about how many. You can also just use this time productively. So looking at each other's exams. And hey, by the way, it's useful for the person who's giving the feedback as well as the person who's receiving the feedback, because the best, we always talk about the best writers write to their audience. They know what their audience is looking for. So similarly here, if you are writing to your audience, then you have to have been in the position of being the audience, being the person who's grading. So it's useful for both, actually. Think about issue spotting and then talking it through, right? So what issues do you see here? Well, I see this. Oh, I didn't see that, but I did think about this piece. So when we talk about exploring all the issues, having that exchange of views can be super helpful with that. Do an argument, counter argument. hey, what about, I was going to say that maybe he was liable. Okay, well, I think he's not liable, and here's why. And presenting kind of each other's reasoning can be super useful, particularly for the MBE. So I know when I talk about issue spotting and all that, you're like, oh, okay, essay writing. But that argument, counter argument, well, I think the answer choice is A, and here's why, can help you identify your own patterns of hey, what am I maybe doing well, and what do I need to work on? And it can also help you kind of change your thinking so that you can address those weaknesses. You can also just straight up quiz each other. Hey, what's the definition of a battery? Oh, it's the intentional touch, harmful or offensive and intentional touching of another. There you go. So you can do any of these things or none of them, and just like be hold each other accountable kind of friend. When we think about motivation, one thing that's sometimes kind of challenging for folks is going to be the goal setting piece of it, right? It's the how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So, hey, I have to prepare for the bar again, and it's this huge thing that's out there, and there's like so much of it, and what am I going to do? You're going to set goals. And so when we talk about that study schedule, that's part of what we mean. We want you to have goals that are specific, that are measurable, that are achievable, relevant, and time-based. So the acronym is SMART. And so, look at Sheldon, he's smart. But so if you tell yourself, today's the day I'm going to do torts, what does that mean? Like, if that's me, I'm going to, go ahead and open up my torts outline and turn on the lecture. And then I'm going to say, gosh, I kind of need a cup of coffee if I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go get my coffee. And when I go over there, I'm going to say, oh, there's so many dishes. Why am I the only person in this family that does the dishes? And then I'm going to do the dishes. And then I'm going to have to go talk to my kids and explain to them why they should be doing the dishes. And then I'm going to be like, you know what? After all this, maybe what we really need is just a different kind. Maybe if I got a new sponge, that would make doing the dishes better. And then next thing you know, I'm at Target. I haven't studied torts at all. I have no idea whether or not I've achieved that goal. There's no way to measure it. But if you say, I'm going to spend an hour reviewing the torts outline, that's time-based, it's specific, you can know whether or not you did it, it's something that you can probably achieve, then I'm going to write a torts question, again, all of those things, and review it for 20 minutes afterwards. Boom, that's a SMART goal. So when you're setting up that schedule, don't just be like, study for the bar. Tell yourself, hey, I'm going to spend, so much time doing so many questions, and get really sort of granular with it, right? Be specific. Okay. I love this little meme I saw the other day, which was if you have to do something and you have to remember like when you do it, like taking medicine or something, give your cat a treat at the same time. And then if you forget your medicine, guarantee the cat will not forget the treat. So I picked this meme that says, never try to out-stubborn a cat. But basically, your brain kind of works the same way as your cat. So you wake up, you're feeling undermotivated, but you have gotten to this point where you've made a habit of, first thing I do when I wake up is write an essay. You can actually just kind of, it's kind of like how we do those things on autopilot and we're not even really thinking about it. But when you have that routine, you don't have to think about it. Like, you don't have to muster up the motivation. You just kind of do it automatically. And so you kind of wake up and you're like, bar, it stinks, whatever. And before you know it, because you're so used to writing that essay first thing when you wake up, there you are writing the essay. Creating a role model can be important. So on I guess it's the right hand, if it's on the right hand side of my screen, it's the right hand side of your screen too, I think. But anyways, that's Michelle Obama's portrait, which is, hanging in the National Gallery. And then on the other side is this little girl. There's a very famous picture of this little girl staring up at Michelle Obama, sort of with this entranced look on her face. And now here's a picture of her wearing a dress that's very similar to Michelle Obama's dress in the picture. And I just love that. But one of the single most effective things that we can do as we're trying to pursue our success is going to be finding role models. So maybe you look at that list of famous people who have failed the bar exam and you're like, if they can do it, I can do it. Maybe it is looking at someone that you know in your personal life and saying, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. Doesn't necessarily have to be another lawyer. It could be just someone who's done something difficult that you can look up to. And you can kind of say to yourself, I want to be like them. I want to channel that spirit, and I want to try to accomplish similar things. So when I went to law school, I was a single parent and I had a 3-year-old. And one of my professors shared with us that when she began law school, she was also a single parent, also with a 3-year-old. And so sometimes when I would feel like, gosh, what am I doing? I don't know if I can do this. I would think to myself about this professor, and I would say, you know what, if she can do it, I can do it. And so your role model can be as simple as that, someone whose story that you identify with, and you kind of tell yourself, I'm going to do something similar here. Okay. You can also use sort of your own internal sort of motivational fire to inspire yourself, right? So I am a sucker for a good motivational quote. Songs can be motivating. There's a Avett Brothers song that goes, decide what to be and go be it. That is super motivating for me. I actually have a t-shirt with that on it. My kids, obviously I'm a cat lover, right? Like I've mentioned this cat thing. There's this great rescue organization called Tiny Kittens. And they show this little tuxedo kitten who he knows when he's supposed to be fed, and he just meows like, that is something. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, pretend that you're in the room with this kitten and you got to do the thing, or he's just going to keep meowing that way. And that's motivating for me. It doesn't matter. It can be as hokey or silly or ridiculous as it is, right? Because at the end of the day, if you pass, who cares? For those of you who are people of faith, you may find some kind of a verse from a religious text that's useful. And for me, the stuff's absolutely going up on Post-it notes and being stuck on my computer and around on the mirror in the bathroom and all of that. So really quickly, we have talked about most retakers are eventually successful. So don't let this setback hold you back. We've talked about how to kind of use this experience to your advantage, in that you have data that first-time takers don't, and you can use those score sheets and your answers to review and create sort of a different structure for yourself this time around. We've talked about how to develop skills, how to develop knowledge, and how to manage your anxiety. And we've talked about what do you do about the fact that this can be super demotivating, and how do you kind of turn that around and become motivated again? So I'm going to remind you one last time of the different offerings that BarMax has, and then I'm going to turn to the questions and answer those. So again, like I said, my absolute favorite thing, one-on-one bar tutors. Hey, I've looked at my score report. I know it's the MPE. Great, we can help you with that. I don't know what to do with this score report. Can you spend an hour with me looking at it and help me develop a schedule? Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Various testimonials, like I said, and you'll see that a number of these even are from repeat takers, like this person who says, hey, I've taken the California bar 4 times before I passed. I used BarMax the first time. I couldn't recommend BarMax any more than I already am. So lots of things there that you could potentially, role models, right? People that you could identify with who are in similar situations who've also been successful. And here's our contact info. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn to the questions and answers and answer those. Well, answer those questions. Imagine that. Okay, so first question is a great one. Do you have a recommended schedule for the February bar, since we don't have the typical amount of time to study? So the short answer to that is sort of. So we do have our sort of standard, starting in December kind of study period. Now, obviously not going to work for those of you who just got your results last Friday and you're trying to figure out what to do next. But you can take that schedule, combine it with sort of your own results and say, okay, from this schedule and my results, what do I need to do to kind of address this, right? Like, how do I kind of manage this? So maybe you don't need as much time with professional responsibility because you did well on that exam. But maybe you need a little more time practicing the MBE. And so you can really personalize it. And we do have some videos that kind of explain how to do a little bit more with that. And if you want one-on-one time, that's available as well. Different studies, strategies for the attorney exam versus the standard. I studied in a way that was more MBE focused last time, and that was a significant error. Yeah, bummer, huh? So attorney exam is, so for those of you who are wondering, you can, California will allow you, if you have been licensed, and I think it's in active practice for 5 or more years, to take what they call the attorney exam, which is just the essay portion. And the idea there is that is going to be, focus on the California rules, right? Like, hey, you've been out in practice somewhere else, you kind of know how to do that. Let's talk about the California rules. So what I would suggest is, it's not wrong to focus on the MBE topics because most of your essays are still going to come from the MBE topics, but you definitely want to make sure you are writing essays, reviewing essay answers, all of that. I know there's folks who say, gosh, I feel like I learned so much from the MBE questions. Not wrong to do them, but I would definitely be spending way more time on the written portion. I will also say, anecdotally, in my experience, practicing attorneys tend to struggle with the PT portion. So definitely take a look at that score. It'll be expressed on your score sheet as essay exam 6. Make sure that you're doing that. Like we said, it's a big percentage of your score. I guess if you're taking just the written portion, it's like 28%, almost a third. So make sure that you're doing that as well. Okay. Does BarMax go through exam questions and how to answer them in your videos? Absolutely. So in terms of both in sort of recorded lectures that you can listen to, but also live office hours where, it's kind of a bunch of folks, let's say maybe 30 folks, and it's me or Celeste, and we're answering questions and working through that kind of stuff. If you're like, I don't know. So we do have those recorded lectures that you can watch. So when you actually go to begin answering questions, there's somebody who talks about how to do that. So different levels, I guess, of attention and personalization that you can obtain through the program, depending on what's most useful for you. So the question, this is a good question. Why is the MBE of 1410, a 141 referred to as 62%? Nice. So the short answer is going to be scaling. So you can think of scaling as kind of, again, a way to try to make things the same amount of difficulty from year to year. So what the national conference is going to do is they're going to use questions that help them kind of figure out they're common questions that are used over and over again every year, and we can look at how many people got them right and how many people got them wrong from year to year, and that helps us gauge kind of about how many people should be scoring what on the MBE. There's fancy math here, and if you thought my harmonic versus constant joke was funny, we can definitely talk about it. But for those of you who are not math nerds, just know there's math behind it that says we're going to make it the same amount of difficulty from year to year. So what that means is that generally when you're looking at a scaled answer, they have added anywhere from 10 to 15 points to that score, with more points being added towards either end. Okay, so what you can do with an MBE score of 1338, so you can actually divide that in half, and you would get, what is that? Let's say 67, just to kind of get it. Wait, no, yeah, no, wait, hang on. I know, it's just I'm a math nerd, but Nietzsche said it's like thinking out loud. So first, you're going to take that 1333.8. You're going to subtract, let's say 13 or 14 points, because you're kind of near the middle there. So going to be, let's say 13, right? That's going to get you down to a 120, and then you can divide it in half. That's going to be about 60% correct, right? Versus if you're closer to 62, you'd be at that 124. You can add, let's say, 15 points. You're at 139, maybe a little bit more than that, depending from year to year. Okay. It's rough. It's hard to estimate exactly well, obviously that's what estimating is, right? But that'll give you kind of a shorthand. So if you're subtracting anywhere from 10 to 15 points on that scaled answer and then dividing by 2, that'll tell you about how many you got correct. Please say more about trigger words. Ooh, I love to talk about trigger words. Sure. So trigger words are going to be those that, so they do 2 things. I call them trigger words because they're a trigger word for you all to actually do your analysis, right? It is also a trigger word for your grader. So sometimes folks think, gosh, should I really just keep using the word because? And the voice of your like 3rd grade language arts teacher is echoing in your head and you're hearing, vary your language, retain your reader's interest. Don't do that, you guys. Bore us. I want to be bored. Bore me. So when you say because, I know that following because is going to be your reasoning. When you say here, comma, I know that's going to begin your analysis. When you say in conclusion, comma, I know that's where your conclusion is. So trigger words are going to be things like, so you can use them to begin your paragraphs, right? Like here, or in this case, or in this instance, or applying the law to these facts, whatever you're going to do, to sort of say, dear grader, I'm beginning my analysis, or for conclusions, hence, therefore, in conclusion, in sum, whatever. And then within your analysis, right? And I feel like I went through my entire first semester of law school and people kept telling me like, you're too conclusory. You need to provide more analysis. And I'm like, I am doing the analysis. Like, what is this analysis that you're talking about that I'm not doing for you? And I finally figured it out. And it sounds so simple, right? But it's like saying, these are the specific facts that satisfy this specific piece of law. And so what they're really looking for is this fact shows is your trigger word, this element is satisfied, or the opposite. This element is satisfied because, there's your trigger word, these facts. Where you kind of have your little conclusion about your specific element and then your connector word like because or since or demonstrates or evinces or whatever. And then you have your facts or whichever way you're doing it, right? For counter arguments, it might be while, W-H-I-L-E, while, or however, as your trigger word, right? Where you might say, while plaintiff will argue this fact shows this element, comma, the better argument is, and then you do the same thing. But again, it's a trigger for you to remind yourself like, oh yeah, I got to make sure I'm connecting the specific fact to the specific law. And it's a trigger for your grader to say, hey, here's where I'm doing this analysis. And then Sonia says, PDFs of your October exam are in the California Bar exam portal. Oh, awesome. That's wonderful. I did not realize that you could get your PDFs that way. That is terrific. So in that case, you guys, you should definitely be looking these up and taking a look at them. And then Sonia says, you've been very helpful and very motivating. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Like I said, you really should be motivated. Don't allow this to be discouraging. Like I said, most of you, statistically, most retakers are eventually successful. That tells me that you guys can do it. It's just a matter of tweaking a few things so that you can get a different result. So I'm going to save this next question about the BarMax live lecture because Celeste is going to answer it. And I will turn to, does the PT for the California bar exam carry more score points than the normal essay questions? Yes, it counts double. So, a 50 on your PT is going to be 100, or a 75 is going to be a 150, that kind of thing. What recommendations do you have for someone who is working full-time and trying to study? Lots of coffee? No. So first off, that is, I know it's challenging and it's going to be hard. And also it is totally doable. Plenty of people have worked full time and also been able to prepare. Okay. So you can do this. And I don't want you to be discouraged because of the difficulty. It's doable. I do want you to be really careful to carve out that time for yourself. You need to be absolutely 100% setting up those specific, measurable, achievable goals and holding yourself accountable. And you need to incorporate kind of the time element. What time do you have available? So I will tell you, when I took the California bar, I was working full time, and I was like, well, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to do an essay every morning. Let me tell you, folks, I am not a morning person. That was not a good idea. So I had to be realistic and say, essay writing going to have to happen in the afternoon or the evening, because that's really when I kind of have my capacity. So offhand, here's a couple of things I would suggest. So being realistic about when you're going to have the energy to do what, and scheduling those tasks that require more energy during the times when you have the energy and the time available, right? If your boss says, look, I can give you 2 weeks or 3 weeks of time, obviously take them up on that. But even better if you can do, your week of the bar exam off, and then half time, so that you have longer, rather than trying to cram everything in 2 weeks at the end, you do 4 weeks of half time, give you a little bit longer period throughout the calendar of time to study and really make that stuff cement in. If you have to pick between sort of review and memorization and practice, always, always, always pick practice. Write that essay question. You're going to learn how this essay how this issue is tested. When you review it, you're going to see organization, you're going to see rules, all of that. So definitely make sure you're doing tons of practice. And really, really, really personalized to your own needs. What did you do well on? What did you need to work on? And focusing on those pieces. I hope that helps. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about that. Just feel free to reach out. Johnny says, great, thanks for your explanation. I'm so glad. I know I was like, wait, let me redo this math. So I'm glad that you caught it. Thanks, I'm glad it was good. How soon should I start studying for the July exam? The answer to that is going to, again, be individual. So one thing I would say, absolutely, you can do pretty much any time is going to be that PT, right? Because it's not like you're going to have to memorize something. You just kind of have to learn the skill of managing the PT. And then once you've got that, it's just keeping fresh with it. But, it would matter to me if you're saying, I'm working full time and, I'm only going to have the evenings and one weekend day. You probably need to start studying sooner rather than later. Versus if you're telling me, I can spend as much time as I like. Well, then I might say, well, right now worry about sort of reading and understanding, and then you can work on memorization later on. So it's really going to be personalized, again, to your own needs. I would say if you have the time and the energy and the motivation, get started with that PT right away. Next most important, if you have plenty of time, would be thinking about really understanding the topics. Next most important thing, if you don't have a ton of time, is going to be practice, practice, practice. So a couple different questions about topics and predictions and all of that. Here's what I will say. Far more, so I'm from Vegas, okay? I get the wanting to gamble a little bit, run the risk, run the odds, whatever. What I'm going to tell you is it's going to be way more useful to look at those essay answers and the issue headings that pop up and see what is commonly tested. I can't tell you whether or not you're going to get a Civ Pro question, but what I can tell you is if you get a Civ Pro question, it is going to have, a person in one state who's going to do something to a person in another state, and there's going to be a question about where they should be sued, right? That is every Civ Pro question ever, practically. So once you know the common topics that come up within those subjects, that's really much more useful than trying to guess what subject is going to be tested. So if you come to me and you say, Jen, community properties making me, I can't wrap my brain around it. I don't understand what happens to the income of a child entertainer. I'm going to say, look, they've tested that, I think, once. I'm not super worried about that. But if you don't know Van Camp and Pereira, we've got another problem. So rather than trying to guess, hey, what are they going to test me on? Look at those subjects and how do we manage that? Okay, question about, in the essay portion, I was trying to discuss too many issues. I ended up running out of time. What do I do? So here's another dated pop culture reference for you, but it's a little bit like playing that old game, grocery store sweep. So grocery store sweep, the objective was to fill your cart with as many sort of pricey items as you could. But you'd always get these folks who would be like, but I love cereal. And then they're off like throwing their cereal in. And you're like, oh my gosh, will you please just go pick up your fillets for heaven's sake? And so a lot of times when I see someone who is running out of time because they are trying to talk about every issue, they're the folks who are going after that, cereal instead of the fillet. So I love this question of, how do I know which ones are the fillet? How do I know what's going to count the most? It is tested more often, right? So you're on that community property essay and you see your Van Camp Pereira issue and you see your child entertainer issue, Van Camp Pereira is going to be worth the most. It's going to have the most facts to it, right? They are telling you by the number of facts that they give you how important an issue is. So the more time they spend on it, the more time you need to spend on it. And then I also want you to look for ambiguity, and that can kind of play with the facts too, because you get some facts that go to the plaintiff, you get some facts that go to the defendant, but if it's ambiguous, that's going to be worth more. So commonly tested, lots of facts, possibly ambiguous, that's how you're going to know that's worth the most. And depending on the topic, so in an analysis heavy topic like con law, you might get maybe 3 or 4 really big issues. You cannot pass this question if you do not talk about these issues, some medium ones and some small ones, versus like evidence where everything's basically a similar amount of facts and everything's basically a similar amount of points. And you just basically have like 6 or 7 medium kind of issues. So it's really kind of thinking about, again, commonly tested, lots of facts. Is it ambiguous? So the question is, my California BarMax books are from 2018. Are they still relevant for the February bar, or do I need to get new ones? I'm going to let Celeste, Celeste's answering that now. So I'm actually going to turn the floor over to Celeste so that she can also answer this question about live lecture. And I'll still be here, so if you have other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. But Celeste also can answer questions. So I want you all to just feel comfortable asking us whatever you need.
Hello, all. This is me. I guess I can turn on my video too. Hello. Yeah, here I am. I don't know that I'm, Anyway, I accidentally hit the button that said I would answer live. Apologies, Jen, for interrupting your lecture, but I'm happy to answer both of these questions. One is what's live are just the webinars and roadmap sessions, office hours, where we give advice about the exam. But in terms of the actual lecture content, those are pre-recorded, so you can listen to them whenever you like. You can download them in your app and listen to them, while you are out and about. One person that I met, like, literally studied BarMax in a hammock in Central Park. Hey, worked for him. So if the weather's nice, try that. You can listen to the lectures anywhere. In terms of the books, there have been only a few updates since 2018. So if you want to use your 2018 books, you can. If you want to buy a new book, reach out to customer support or just go. And I think there's a place you can buy stuff within BarMax. I think it's about $100 for a new book, but there have only been small, modest updates. The most recent update was to civil procedure, and you want to make sure that you're using the version in your app or on, in the website, because there were a few changes to the organization of that, but very few changes to actual substance, like a couple deadlines changed. And I don't know exactly when we got those in the outline, but you're fine with your 2018 books. And I'm going to give Jennifer back her show. Jennifer, you're doing a terrific job, okay? Wait, Jennifer, do we still have you? You turned off your video. That's not fair.
Do. Sorry.
Boy, are we split,
I totally turned off video, and then I was talking, and I was like, wait, I'm muted.
Of ours.
One question that I saw was, where do I find the recent videos? And I had said, oh, and apparently I only answered to me and Celeste and Katie, but what I said was, so for webinars those are open to everybody. This is a webinar. You can actually see it on YouTube. There's probably some higher tech way to do this, but I just searched for TestMax Prep or BarMax on YouTube, and there they are. For those of you who are saying like, hey, I want to see the office hours too, you can actually, on the left-hand side of your app, there's like a little thing that it looks like a pie with like a triangle on it, or it looks like a clock. Office hours are also available there. So it's all recorded. And I would say that is something I really love about BarMax as well, right? So while the lectures are recorded, as Celeste says, you could listen to them anywhere. I definitely could not do a hammock, partly because I think I'd be so worried about falling out of the hammock. But you could definitely listen to those anywhere, but you're not going to lose that in-person touch, right? You still have the ability to come to an office hour and ask questions, or have a live lecture, or reach out. And we also have folks who send us an email and say, hey, I was listening to the lecture on this. Can you give me an example? I didn't really get what that explanation was. So lots of pieces there that we're happy to work with you on. On the app, there were some questions that had not been answered, and some answers that dated back a few years, and the answers were not clear. Has the answer bank been updated? So I think, Anonymous, you are talking about the discussion boards that we have with our MBE questions. And so for those of you who are not as familiar, I think what Anonymous is referencing is that there are these, when you go in and you answer questions on the MBE, if you have a question about it, you actually can go to this discussion board and hear, see discussion about it. So those discussion boards are still available, and we've actually taken on a new full-time employee, or not full-time, but new employee who's going to help us answer those questions. You're right that sometimes it does take us a minute to get there. So I would say, if you're like, I have this question, what do I do? As I said, Celeste and I are both super available. Don't be afraid to reach out to us over email or through the office hours, in addition to just looking at that, those discussion boards. If I have access to the app, do I really need an updated book? Isn't the app updated every bar exam or every year? Yeah. But certainly there are folks who prefer having paper copies. And so I think that's, again, a personalized thing. How do the office hours work if I'm out of state? And it looks like Celeste already answered that, but I'll answer it here just in case others have questions. But office hours are, available anytime. They're over the web like this, but they are set to, I think they're all set to Pacific time. So you just have to be willing to come in. And that said, they're also recorded. So if you just can't make it at a particular time, there will be a recording of them as well. I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to go ahead and just come on over here and just talk with y'all.
I have one more question that came to me, but you, having been in academic support in California, will know more. How difficult is it for a person with a disability who needs accommodations to get those accommodations from the California bar, and how should the student consider going about that?
That is an excellent question. So I'm going to say medium difficult. I've certainly worked with folks who've had easier times in other states and folks who've had harder times. So I feel like California is kind of in the middle. The first step is that there are going to be some forms that you need to fill out on the on the California Bar website. And there's a form for you, and there's a form for your doctor or other treating professional to explain, right? So just to give like a super simple example, maybe you need some kind of, adaptive equipment that you're going to bring with you, pretending we're back in person, to the testing center, and you want to make sure that those are accommodated. So you can fill out that form. You're going to take it to your doctor. Let's say it's your chiropractor, who's going to say, hey, yeah, she really needs this special cushion and this footstool, or her back's going to be in a lot of pain, all of that. Here's what I would say. Number one, do not underestimate the part of the question that asks for, I think they call it a personal narrative, but basically it's your opportunity to explain what it is that you're asking for and why you're asking for it. So, that's your place to say, hey, I have excruciating lower back pain and I manage it pretty well through physical therapy, but if I don't bring in this special cushion, then I'm going to have, I'm not going to be able to focus. Don't also underestimate the importance of having an appropriate treating professional. So I use the example of a chiropractor because for back pain, a lot of folks, trust chiropractors to treat and address back pain. But you wouldn't want to use like your allergist, right? So don't be surprised if, so really think carefully about who are you going to have fill in this form for you. Don't be surprised if they sort of deny you the first time. But if they do deny you, they'll say, well, we're denying because we need more information about whatever. And then usually once you provide the whatever, that's when they're really going to make the decision about the accommodations. One thing that they're going to look for is going to be the length of time that you've had accommodations. So again, in your personal narrative, if let's say you were somebody who was diagnosed with a learning disability in law school, you may want to say in your personal narrative, hey, I didn't realize I had dyslexia until I got tested when I was in law school because I realized it was taking me 6 times as long as my classmates to read, or whatever it was, right? But you can address that like, hey, this is why this is fairly recent in your personal narrative. Another thing that they seem to find persuasive is going to be if you can show, hey, here's how things changed for me once I received accommodations, right? So I was diagnosed with dyslexia in law school. I was getting C's and D's before, and then my grades went to A's and B's. That's persuasive for them. So, yeah. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So here's a question here's someone who says, hey, I got tested after I failed the bar. I couldn't get through the MBE questions. Yeah, I mean, and hey, by the way, like I said, there are, I said there's 3 reasons. And then I said, well, there's actually like 4. And 4 being those undiagnosed learning disabilities. So I'm so glad that you got tested, Mariel. I do hope you're going to try again with accommodations, and you can use that personal narrative space to explain that and to say, hey, after after I had this experience of not being able to pass because of timing, I got myself tested and here's what I found. Here's a question. Are the one-on-one sessions extra cost? So yes, if you want to meet just one-on-one, there is an additional cost for that tutoring. You can buy just one hour session, or you could buy a package. And then if you think, gosh, I don't know if I really need, so that would allow you then to have 1 hour, kind of meet somebody, see if you like them, figure out if that's where you want to be. You also don't necessarily have to have BarMax. You could be using something else and get tutoring, but obviously we're going to be familiar with our materials. And then if you feel like, gosh, I don't know if I really need exactly one-on-one, don't forget that we do have those office hours where we'll sort of lecture about a little topic and then answer questions and all that afterwards. Oh yeah, that's great, Mariel. I'm so glad that you were able to see that increase in your MBE. It's it's hard because it's like that combination of making sure you get the accommodations you need and then also making sure you have the practice that you need. So it's kind of both. Yeah. And I agree with Celeste. You definitely sound ready. It's your time, man. Let's make this happen for you. Oh, I see. You were going to take the October bar, but you had to withdraw because you're in Hawaii. Is that right? Okay. The example you gave, a Civ Pro, yes, that would be that would trigger like your your personal jurisdiction. So the example I gave, just to refresh everybody, was the, person in state A does something to person in state B, and now we have to figure out where they're getting sued. So first you would talk about personal jurisdiction and like where are you subject to the court's jurisdiction. You would also want to address venue. So like where within that state are you subject, to jurisdiction? And then depending if it's like, if you've got a federal problem there, right, you've got state A, state B, and the amount in controversy is over 75,000, you might also have a subject matter jurisdiction. So yeah, great question. I love the fact you were able to identify that. Good job. Are physical conditions the only reason for accommodations? No, accommodations are going to be appropriate for anything that impacts your activities of daily living. So I use a physical condition as the example because it's generally the one that folks sort of recognize and are most familiar with, but it would include physical or physical conditions like like the back pain example or being blind. It would also include learning disabilities like dyslexia. It could also potentially include psychiatric disabilities like anxiety. So anything, basically the rule is anything that's going to impact your activities of daily living, your ability to work or learn or take care of yourself or whatever it might be. What is the most number of times you have worked with a person who's not been successful on the exam? I mean, look, here's the deal. As long as you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to work with you. So it's not like for me, I'm like, oh, you've taken it more than 3 times. I'm done. I cannot help you any longer. Like that's not a thing for me. And I will say I've worked with folks and seen them be successful on their 6th or 7th attempt. So as long as you're willing to do it, I'm willing to do the work with you. And as I said, most people who continue to retake the bar will eventually be successful. We did find an interesting newspaper article about a guy who's taken the exam. What was it, Celeste? Like 50 times or something, and then finally passed and now has a sort of, thriving law practice where he's, working and supporting his family and helping his community.
It was insane. It was an LA Times article, and I don't know. It was at least like 20 something, but it was an LA Times article. So however many times you've taken the bar, this guy took it more.
Yeah, you get a lot.
I promise. And I think I have a good friend who took the bar, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 times, probably 6 times. And she's a great lawyer. Mm-hmm. She's really smart and works her butt off. She's not a great test taker, but she's a great lawyer. So, And she's really zealous for her clients. And I love hearing her stories. Anyway, you'll be great lawyers. Persevere.
Yep. So TS says, isn't it too late to get an accommodation for the February exam? That's an interesting question. Normally it would be. But I don't know if because of obviously they've extended the date to sign up for our repeat takers. I don't know if they would similarly extend the date for the accommodations. I will say the California bar examiners are terrific about answering questions. Do not hesitate to reach out to them. They are great both in terms of answering a phone call, but also responding to email. So super available. If you're thinking, gosh, maybe I do need accommodations, I will say whether it's too late to register with them for accommodations, I'm not sure. I would imagine they would extend that date for those of you who are repeat takers. But I will say, if you've never been diagnosed before, it would be a challenge to get that done in time, because that usually is a fairly involved experience, right? So it's using our back pain example again, getting evaluated by a practitioner who is competent to make that diagnosis and can also make recommendations. And so that's how long is it going to take for you to get in with that person? How much testing are they going to need? All that kind of thing. Yeah. So what other questions do you have, guys? So the question is, where do I go to order a new book? Good question. So as Celeste mentioned, it's available on the whatever the shop is on the website, but you also could reach out to customer service. You can also use that info@testmaxprep.com.
Yeah, there's a little shopping cart icon in the app. No, it doesn't see the book option. Yeah, reach out to support if you can't find where to buy the book. Or sales. Actually, sales would be even quicker. Honestly, reach out to sales. Support has a lot going on and they help with everything in the world, but sales can easily and quickly sell you anything you need. A lot of them are also very knowledgeable if it comes to tutoring and stuff like that, but they can certainly get you a book. Okie dokie.
I am going to, here's a question that just came to the panelists, but I'm going to answer it here because it's one that's near and dear to my heart. And that is, how do we get our families and friends to respect our boundaries when we need to study? So a couple of things. So first of all, if you are the first lawyer or one of the first lawyers in your family, like raise your hand, right? That's a bunch of us here. Your families, they're not familiar with it, right? And so it's kind of preparing them with what you're doing. They're not like your law school friends where they're going through this with you and they kind of have a sense of what to expect. They feel like, okay, we already gave you all of this time that you were in law school, and now you're telling us you need another 6 weeks or 8 weeks or however many weeks it is, right? They also think, well, you're really smart. And you're like, I am, but I still need to prepare. And so a couple of things that I would suggest. So part of it is just like being super honest and forthright with them about what it is that you are doing, right? Helping them understand that. The next thing that I would suggest would be anything that you can do that would allow them to become a part of this. So can they be your accountability buddy? Can your kids do their homework while you do yours? Can your mom be the one who runs through your flashcards with you? That piece of it, can you involve them? Having that really set schedule and reserving time for them on that schedule. So when I was, my son was 3 when I was in law school. He was 6 when I graduated. And basically I made a commitment to him that, from dinner time to his bedtime was his time. And he knew that. Now, he knew that that might mean that on the weekends he had to go to grandma's so that mom could study, but he knew that that was his time. And so the more you can do that for your family and say, look, I'm not available during these times, but I am available during these times. And I've actually had applicants who would hang up their schedule to remind their significant other of like, look, Friday night's reserved for you. The last thing that I would suggest would be being really clear about what would be helpful to you, right? So a lot of times you, particularly again, if you're the first one in the family, they're so proud of you. They're so happy for you and they just want to help. So they're dropping off dinner and you're like, oh my gosh, can you just leave me alone? While they're thinking, I brought you dinner, so being really direct with them about this is what I need a, or you call them Sunday night and you're like, God, I just need to talk about anything that's not the bar exam. And they say, oh, we're so happy to hear from you. Tell us all about your studying. And you're like, oh. So just being really direct with them. Does it look like, having your mom come over and do your laundry and not talk to you? Does it look like being able to call your parents and just complain? Does it look like family game night where nobody talks about the bar? So number one, being really clear with them so they understand what you're going through, because they're really not going to get it otherwise. Being sure to reserve time for them in your schedule and to share with them what that's going to be, and being clear with them about what you need. And if you can involve them in some way so that they kind of can feel like they're helping, those can all be ways to help with those boundaries. And just letting them know that, like, hey, this is the final push. Like, if you can help me through these next, couple months, then it's going to have a payoff later. Advice if you can't pick between two answers and the time is running out on MBE. So practice. That will help. Second piece of advice would be, a lot of us tend to decide what the answer is going to be. So we'll decide, guilty. The answer choices are guilty, not guilty. And we'll decide, dude sounds like he's guilty, and we want to get rid of those not guilty answers. Don't do that. Really want you to focus on the reasoning more than the result. We don't hear law professors say, like, oh, there is one right answer and it is important, you must reach it. No, they say, we want to see you think like a lawyer. So look at that reasoning portion, make sure that that's the answer that best reflects your choices. If you have to guess worst case survival, let me back up before that and say so that's the longer term sort of answer, doing a ton of practice, making sure you're paying attention to the reasoning. The next piece of advice that I would give you would be, when we're talking about the best answer, that's going to be the answer that is most specific in terms of law and fact. So we talked about, when I was mentioning trigger words, I said, hey, don't forget that we're looking for, how we're going to pair this specific piece of law, the element, the factor, whatever it is, with this specific facts. So not a summary of the facts, not a recap of the facts, but this specific fact plus this specific law is the best analysis. It's going to be the same thing on the MBE. So if you have an answer choice that says not guilty because he lacked intent, and not guilty because he was voluntarily intoxicated to the point he couldn't form intent, that second one, which is more specific, is going to be the better answer. So if you get it down to two and you're like, gosh, I'm just not sure, make sure that you're looking for the one that is more specific. Do I need to create a new account so that my account is fresh and new, or do I continue to use the same login and password? It looks like Celeste is going to answer that, and that's a good thing because I would be deferring to her anyway.
Yep, it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever login and password. If you say purchase BarMax in 2018 and then, whatever, you had a baby and, 14 other things happened, you didn't take the bar and here you are, or you didn't pass the bar and here you are. Yeah, just go to TestMax prep/BarMax, or you can even go to just getbarmax.com. Getbarmax.com. That's easy to remember. That will take you to the right place. And then you want to log in with the same email that we had for you back then, because it'll all be tied to your same account. It's just will make for a much smoother restart for you. And you can get the app again, the BarMax app, and you can download it again and log in with the same credentials. And we say, welcome back. access isn't like permanent anymore, but for some of you, when you purchased it, it was. So, rock on.
Whitney asks, how much or any advice on outlining essays, how much or how little should I be putting into the outline? Sometimes I feel like I end up basically writing the essay rather than outlining it. So a couple of things. One is when you're writing that essay, remember that you're doing that for yourself, or I'm sorry, when you're writing the outline, not the essay. The essay's for the grader, the outline's for you. So you should have as much or as little in that outline as is useful for you. General advice is going to be that you should be spending about a quarter to a third of your time on the outline process. So for an hour-long essay, that should be 15 to 20 minutes. And what I would want to see in the outline would be a list of the issues that you've spotted and which facts you're going to pair with those issues. And some sort of an organizational structure, like you kind of have a sense of how you're going to, like what order you're going to do all this stuff in. So, for some folks that really is like a very thorough kind of detailed point by point outline. For other folks, it's a little bit more sparse, but you want to have at least kind of, here are the issues, here's the order I'm going to do them in, and here are the facts that go with them. And I would say at the end of the day, you can also experiment with outlining on the computer. A lot of folks really, really like that. Not me, I'm still a pen and paper girl, but you're not going to have that option anyways. So try outlining on the computer where maybe it doesn't matter if you feel like your outline is super thorough. Is there an average length an essay question could be? And I think you really mean essay answer. And my answer to that is going to be no. So I have seen representative answers or so-called model answers up on that webpage that are a page and a half. And I've seen them that are 8 pages long. So it's the best piece of advice I could give you is that it's going to be reflective of how much time they spent on it. So in general, if their essay is an entire page, the question, your essay answer should be, reflective of that length versus if it's shorter, but not always. Sometimes those shorter questions have just as many, or if not more issues than others. So I guess I would say rather than thinking about like how long does it have to be, think about what are the issues in here that are the big money issues and how much time do I need to adequately address those issues, right? Rather than like necessarily, hey, I have to hit X number of words or X number of pages. There were 4 big issues here. There were 6 medium ones and a bunch of small ones. Have I got them all in there?
My friend, we're getting close to the 2-hour mark.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have covered most of the questions here. And I think we are about to call it a day. Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. So one question is, are webinars in the app or in YouTube? And webinars are, I believe, available in both, right, Celeste?
The webinars are available in both. Here, I'll get my camera on again so I'm not a disembodied voice. The webinars are in both.
What's funny is I almost wore my BarMax t-shirt today, and then
we would have been such a team. Go BarMax. Go BarMax. Okay, so the webinars are in our YouTube page. And the webinars are also with all of the office hours under the office hours icon within BarMax. So if you have BarMax, You can look at the webinars for free. The office hours are paid, but even the free version of the app, I think now has the webinars. Somebody mentioned that in a meeting and I thought it was super cool. So that should work, that you go in the free version of the app. Even when we don't have all the lecture content there, we do have the webinar content. Now, the office hours are part of our paid content because, come on, somebody's got to pay me and Jennifer, right? But and we pay those wonderful lecturers, those Harvard Law professors who give those lectures and such forth, the other esteemed lecturers that we have, most of them. Well, they are not volunteers. So we do want you to buy BarMax. We do hope that you'll find our lectures and flashcards and all of the past questions that we've assembled for you and the support and help that you can get when you write to us. Jennifer and I do try to keep up with it Monday through Friday on that, when we get questions flying our way. And we hope that you are able to, use all those resources, but the webinars are free in both places. Okay. NBE. So somebody asked about the explanations. Where we have NCBE explanations, we have used those. Okay. But there are some questions for which we have written NCBE, where we have had to write the correct answer explanations ourselves because NCBE didn't cough any up. Okay. So there you go. I think we're
asked about Venue and Civ Pro. So with 2 minutes left, here's what I'm going to say super quick on Venue and Civ Pro. Think of jurisdiction as the state where you get to hear the case, and venue as the place within the state where it is most convenient for it to be heard. So jurisdiction is where is it proper, venue as where is it most convenient. Celeste is like, maybe, maybe not. What do you think, Celeste?
No, I like it. I like it.
Quick, easy way to explain
how
that.
I fit it into the world of how I teach personal jurisdiction versus subject matter jurisdiction, right? Subject matter jurisdiction, can a federal court hear this dispute, and is this the right state to hear the dispute, or is this federal court in the right state, personal jurisdiction, and is this the right courthouse venue? I like that, actually. Yeah, between the two of us.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. As Celeste said, we are really good about trying to get back to those. We're glad that you showed up. We hope it was helpful, and we're around if you need us.
And all the best to your success. Have a safe and successful 2021.
Yep.